most of it was, okay, shoot a steel plate at 1,000 yards. Woohoo, everybody has a good time. Well, that's actually the opposite of good hunter training. Now these folks wake up on the second day and realize, oh my God, I just shot 700 yard steel 9-inch plate. That's amazing. You're generally speaking going to get about a 1 foot per second shift in your muzzle velocity. And 80 feet a second shift is huge, in my opinion. That was Mother Nature's way to preserve the species because they're raised around tigers and leopards and severe meat-eating type critters. So he wasn't the biggest one in the herd, but that's the one I shot. It was the right thing to do. It's the most moral and ethical thing to do. Hi, this is Tim Fallon with the FTW Ranch and the SAAM Hunter Training Program, and you're listening to the Wild Initiative.
Put down your latte and pull on your boots.
You and I and everybody listening to this owns 640 million acres.
I think he killed more deer drinking his coffee, smoking a cigarette in the pickup truck than I did spending all that time freezing my butt off.
Something that I would hope is that people realize that those are wild animals and they have savage natures.
I look forward to packing animals out. I look forward to that pain of success.
Doesn't matter where you were born. It doesn't matter where you live. I've said it before, and you know what? I'll say it again louder for the people in the back. Your present circumstance should not limit your passions.
This is Jay Scott of the Jay Scott Outdoors podcast.
Hey, this is Ryan Callahan.
Hi, this is Jules McQueen.
Hey everybody, Jason Carter here with Epic Outdoors.
Hey guys, this is Tim Burnett with Solo Hunter.
You're listening to The Wild Initiative.
Hey y'all, welcome to another episode of The Wild Initiative, brought to you as part of the Waypoint Outdoor Collective. All right, y'all, so getting on to today's episode, I am talking with Tim Fallon of the FTW Ranch and the SAAM Hunter Training Program. Tim was introduced to me by Larry Weissoon. We got a chance to talk for a couple minutes before this. I'm really excited. Tim, thanks so much for hopping on the show with me today.
Oh, thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to it.
So I always like to start out. One thing I'd like to know is, how did you originally get into all of this, hunting and shooting? What was your introduction?
Well, my favorite story is I was really drunk one night in a bar. Look, I was lucky. I was raised in a hunting family. My dad was a big hunter, so I started very early. And life fast forwards, and through the military and so forth, I kind of got away from it. Then shortly got back into it in the early 80s again, and have been hunting around the world really ever since. I'm kind of addicted to it. I am a retard. I've got over 350 taxidermy mounts in the lodge here. And I love to hunt. I love the experience of it and all that goes with it.
That's awesome. So did you, you were deployed. Did you do any hunting while you were deployed? No, I wish. The places I was, you weren't allowed to hunt four-legged animals at all. So just the two-legged, the two-legged variety, I suppose. It's always interesting. I've talked to a lot of guys who have fought in a lot of different places abroad, and it's interesting hearing some of the stories about some of the stuff they probably shouldn't have been doing on the side. It
happens.
A lot of that involving the hunting, and it's interesting. A lot of those I haven't been able to put on the actual podcast, but those are some I enjoyed. But so you came back, you started hunting again. What brought you to start the FTW Ranch?
Well, the opportunity came up to buy it, and at the same time, I'd been thinking that, there's no place you can go to learn how to be a better hunter, meaning you can learn how to shoot, basically. There were some schools out there, but they weren't really centralized on the hunting theme. Most of it was, okay, shoot a steel plate at 1,000 yards. Woohoo, everybody has a good time. Well, that's actually the opposite of good hunter training. People start winging lead out there and making shots that are probably not humane or reasonable. And so looked around, and so I bought the ranch in 96. By 98, had become pretty convinced that this was the perfect hunting training ranch, if you will. And then we launched the program off officially in 2005. I needed to move out here. I had to live here full time. At the time, I was living in South Carolina when I bought the ranch. So I finally got out here full-time in 2004, launched the program off in 2005, and then we started doing the Tier 1 military sniper training in 2008 as we got more and more ranges built up. So, between the two, we stay busy all year.
So tell us a little bit about the ranch. Where's it located? Just give us the overview.
Sure. It's 12,000 acres of, as I said to you earlier, it's 12,000 acres of insane. It's nothing but rugged mountains. We have 35 active ranges on the ranch. We're about 2.5 hours west of San Antonio, and it's literally in the middle of nowhere. It's no cell phone coverage. It's wonderful. So it's a beautiful place. It's nothing but rugged, rocky mountains covered with cedar on the hillsides and a lot of oak trees and so forth. And it's a perfect habitat to also raise a lot of different species from around the world that are either endangered or extinct where they're indigenous from. So and we do that as well.
Well, it's really interesting because you're telling me this, and you tell people, okay, I've got a ranch in Texas. You don't think like, okay, this is going to be like rugged mountainous terrain. That's not what you think of, I feel like, when you think of Texas.
Right. It's interesting. This is called the Escarpment Valley of Texas. So it's south of kind of the hill country. It's the trailing end of the hill country. But these mountains weren't pushed up. These were washed away in that last big ice age. And so it's just nothing but rugged, deep canyons, and makes great for angled shooting and, long distance shooting, lots of wind training, because if you don't like the wind here, just wait 5 seconds. It's going to change.
Well, that's something interesting. I remember I learned. I was out in New Mexico on an aoudad hunt.
Yep.
And, a lot of that terrain is probably very similar. I mean, effectively neighbors right there. And a lot of that terrain is, I imagine, very similar to what it's like on your ranch, where you've got these really rugged, craggy areas. You're shooting kind of across canyons to especially get at those sheep.
Right.
But I remember thinking that was something very interesting. I learned how much the wind, like you can know what the wind is on the peak over here that you're shooting at. You can know what the wind is where you're shooting from, but especially when you're shooting through those canyons, you have no blessed idea what's going on in between you and that target in the slightest.
No, you don't. And it's funny, Sam, the average hunter really does not have any idea of wind drift or bullet drift in the different winds and the angles they may come at you at. And so that's one of the most important things that folks learn here during the 5-night, 4-day course is what shots they should and should not make. Because we try to preach that, look, if you're not sure as you're looking through the scope, don't pull the trigger. It's okay. It's not called I hope I hit it. It's called hunting, and you're supposed to kill it in one shot. So it's I've had a lot of shots around the world I did not take because I just wasn't sure.
It's very interesting because you talk about, okay, what range can you shoot at is very different than your effective range as a hunter.
Yes, it is.
There are two very, very different things.
Yep.
And the distance you can shoot at is, I mean, shoot, I went out with a good buddy and he took me out to 2,000 yards.
Okay.
And I was nailing a target out at that distance. That's all well and good. That's under perfect conditions, this, that, and the other. Your effective range is going to change with every single situation. Exactly. It's not the max distance you can shoot. It's the max distance you can shoot effectively.
Right. Yeah, as we say here in the school, it's cool to wound a steel plate, but it's not cool to wound an animal at all.
Absolutely. So what, tell us maybe a little bit about the course, talking specifically about how you center around like figuring out your effective range as a hunter, the ethics of deciding on a distance to shoot.
Sure. Well, look, it's a crawl, walk, run process. Everything we teach here is A-way. We like to say it's A-way. There's lots of ways to do things. We're going to show you lots of them. It's yours to decide which works best for you. But look, it's a crawl, walk, run process. We start out with some classroom, a couple hours on the first morning, kind of get everybody on the same sheet of music with the terminology and definition and some ballistics work and so forth. Then we're going to go show you a way to clean a gun that works well here. There's lots of ways to do it. And then we're going to go down and get the principles of marksmanship, knocked out, which takes about an hour, show you just different techniques. We start out in the prone position typically, unless someone has a physical handicap and they have to shoot on a bench, that's fine. And then that's kind of where the rubber meets the road from that point on. So it's fun because we'll get guys, I mean, serious Weatherby Award winners, male and female, through this place. And they might have come with the wife. So the wife wants to get trained and learn. She wants to start hunting. So women are smart, right? They say, yeah, I want to get properly trained. So the husband comes along with them and they're like, oh, God, I don't need this. And by day 2, she's just smacking him. I mean, hammering him. So anyways, we go through the principles of marksmanship, and then we start what we call walking the guns out. You're not walking them out, but you're actually dialing them out or holding over at 100, 200, 300. We typically build a range card. Max range is 700 yards, and we don't promote shooting animals at 700 yards, but it's fun. Now these folks wake up on the second day and realize, oh my God, I just shot 700 yard steel 9-inch plate. That's amazing. So now they're more capable of doing what they've ever thought they would be capable of doing, using their own equipment, right? We promote them, and we're gear neutral. So we love all guns, scopes, and bullets. We're not trying to sell them anything at all. So from that point, on day 2, we're going to start going into more drills, holdover drills. I have target drills, all kinds of fun, cool stuff. And what we're doing really is driving home the principles of marksmanship. So everything starts to become muscle memory. And from there, we're going to go through positional training, sitting, kneeling, standing, shooting off sticks, unsupported, etc. And then really on day 3, we're going to really start driving home hunting situational courses. We call it golf with guns, though. And so they're 20-shot courses, doing different hunting scenarios and really driving home. And during this whole process, the students getting a feel for like, okay, I think 350 is really my max, or 400 is my max. And then we're going to start training on a lot of wind calling. And then we'll get them back in the class, show them the philosophy and the theory of it, and then go back out on the end of day 3 and really practice it a lot. And then on day 4, there's 2 kinds of classes, by the way. There's a 5-night 4-day and a 3-night 2-day. The 3-night 2-day was developed for postgraduates. And I get it. Not all postgraduates or not all students of the 3-night 2-day are postgraduates. Some are first-time students. And a funny story about that, and they don't have time for 5-night 4 days. I get it. So, but we've never had a first-timer 3-night 2-day course attendee not drive off the grants going, crap, I should have done 5 nights, 4 days, and then come back. And that's fine, because we can only teach so much. We don't teach anything we don't practice. We're not going to throw a bunch of stuff at you and expect you to remember. That's not good training. So, yeah, it's 4 days of just a ton of fun. They'll shoot about 200, depending on whether it's a precision course or a safari course. We have a dangerous game course as well. And, where they're getting chased by our life-size elephants and buffaloes and leopards and lions and grizzly bears and brown bears and all that. It's great fun.
So, you talked a little bit about, again, deciding what your effective range would be. What, say a new hunter, they're like, okay, I'm a decent shot. What are some considerations they need to take in mind as they're trying to sort out what their effective max range is in a hunting situation?
Well, here's the good news. The first step is learning good shooting principles and skill sets and keeping that as a muscle memory device, which takes a lot of practice, a lot of dry firing, and so forth. Shooting, in my opinion, is one of the most perishable skills on earth. If you don't use it, it's gone. It's not like riding a bike at all. Problem is you can't see yourself shoot. So I don't care how good a shooter you think you are, which is the reason the military sends 150 people through here a year. They get tuned back up all the time. I mean, every time they go on pre-deployment, they get tuned up again. And so a hunter needs to do the same thing. So once you've got good basics down, your equipment because you brought it here through 4 days, your scope works, your gun likes your bullet. About 50% of the bullets, ammo that comes here with a new student, he thought the gun liked it. Turned out it really didn't like it. And so therefore we stock a lot of different kinds of ammo to get a guy through the course. So anyways, he's got his gear sound, his principle sound, his gear is sound. He's practiced a lot of different environmental shooting positions, if you will. And then we try to teach him the wind calling part of it, which is a huge part of the success of a hunt. And then a lot of the training, the last 2 days of a 4-day course is spent around what we call hair in the scope. And we're not talking about your hair. We're talking about animal hair. So we've literally had snipers miss a coyote at 110 yards because nobody is immune to it. I'm not immune to it. And trust me, I did one in Tanzania last December. I don't even want to talk about it. It's embarrassing. You can't screw up a shot any more than I did. And I just put my head down. Are you kidding me? I teach this stuff for a living. What the hell? So anyways, we work on them. So when the opportunity does come up, you've been sitting here watching this canyon for 7 days for a big mule deer. And all of a sudden your guide says, hey, there he is by the green tree and the white rock. Really? Which one? So we take them through the steps. When you get into camp, let's talk about how we're going to call distance. Who's going to call distance? Who's going to call direction? Let's make some drawings of this canyon we've been overlooking. And you pay 10 grand for the hunt. You're paying it whether you kill the deer or not. And all of a sudden there's your 200-inch mule deer. Guess what you're going to do? You're going to lose your marbles. I mean, your breathing's going to go nuts. Your heart rate's going to go crazy. And what we do is teach people how to stay calm, cool, and collected. Talk to yourself. Breathe, 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 stay calm. And then we put them through several drills, getting them better and better and better at that. So that's a so important part of the hunting skill set is learning how to remain calm, cool, and collected. And if you can't get your stuff together, hey, don't shoot. It's real simple. So we promote the concept of, let's say I've got a 9-inch kill zone. If you're getting any more than a third of a wobble in the scope in that, just don't shoot. Just fix something. You got to do something. Either lean into the bipod some more, get a better position, take a few breaths, say a few prayers, whatever you got to do to get straight, but you need to do it. And that's what typically happens, Sam, is that people are rushed. They're getting too much wobble, and the next thing they do is they smash the trigger because they want the bullet to go right there. Bam. So they smash the trigger. The problem is that when you smash the trigger, you also buck your shoulder, and guess what's attached to your shoulder? The buttstock of the gun. So now you've moved that bullet inches off intended impact point. So it's just, and I don't care how you are or who you are and how much experience you've got, nobody's immune to that problem. So we work a great deal amount of time on solving the hair and the scope issues, we call it.
I love that term, because everyone tends to call it, buck fever or whatever it is, but that doesn't apply to everything. But you know what? It happens on just about any animal you have in your scope and your sights, whatever that may be. So I like that term. So, we talked again about wind can be one factor. What are other factors, hair in the scope, wind, what are other factors that can affect your shot as a hunter out in the field that maybe new shooters should be aware of?
Well, you've got angles, upwards or downwards, that'll affect bullet drift, obviously, bullet impact. And if it's a severe enough angle, like 30 plus degrees, it can be amazing. I mean, even out to 400 and 500 yards. You've got angles to worry about. You've got temperatures, you've got elevation. And we do our system here based on density altitude, which is what any airline pilot is familiar with. So if you look at the DA chart, there's at certain temperatures, at certain elevations, your air density becomes this. And so we here at the ranch, we use a 4,000 density altitude as a standard, which is 80 degrees at 2,000 foot altitude. But if you're going to go down to sea level, and worse yet, you're going to go to Tajikistan and have a 550 or 600 yard shot at a Marco Polo sheep at 15,000 feet at minus 20 degrees, look out, you're going to have some massive ballistic changes, or could. So, it's in the worst case scenario is you go to 15,000 feet and it's 80 degrees that day. Now you've got a massive, massive change. And so we take people through those ballistics. They get a range card when they leave here for their bullet, gun, and scope. And they can call us, and I probably get 10 calls a week. Hey, I'm going elk hunting in Colorado, or I'm going to Tajikistan, or I'm going to, Mongolia, or wherever. So we rerun them a card at the new environment. So that's the new standard for where they're going hunting. And you have to understand all those basics, the number, what I'm shocked at, Sam, is the number of people that go to Pakistan, Tajikistan, wherever, in these massively expensive hunts, and they're not prepared for it. I mean, they just think they're going to pull the old 30-06 out and wing it at 550 yards. And so many people come home disappointed. It's tragic.
Well, across the board, we're so willing to, invest $2,000 into a rifle, $2-3 grand into a rifle. Some people, 10, 20, 50, $100,000 for a high-end overseas hunt. We spend all of this money, yet investing our time is way too much. No.
Right.
You know, investing in yourself, one, your time, and two, investing in yourself. No, I can't do that. How?
Right.
That's insane to me. That is absolutely insane to me.
We hear it, Sam. We hear it all the time. Like we do all the major shows, right? SCI, Wild Sheep, Dallas, Houston, et cetera, NRA. And people will come by, they're interested, and subconsciously, in my opinion, I think they know they need help. Like they just finished a hunt and blew a shot or whatever. But they're like, nah, I know how to shoot. Okay. Invariably, sometime over the next 12 months, 24, 36 months, we're going to see that guy in the booth again, and he's writing a deposit check to come to the school because he went on another hunt and blew it. But, you know, look, people need to look at it kind of like as an insurance policy. You're going to go on a let's say a Markhor hunt in Pakistan, which is now running an average of $130,000 a pop. And it's a great program, and it has saved the Markhor in Pakistan, honestly.
Oh, yeah.
And so, you know, that's a whole other story. But, I mean, to not invest, $4,000 into making sure you can make that shot, or at least you got the best opportunity, or making sure that shot you should not have taken and you took by accident, that's the most important thing, or shouldn't have taken, if you know what I mean.
Absolutely.
So we don't tell students what their limitations are. Look, that's a moral decision they have to make on their own. We try to make them as good as we can make them. And most people leave here very capable shooting 350 to 500 yards in the right conditions, but they'll know, most importantly, what conditions are not right and don't even try the shot. So as I tell people all the time, look, just because you've been here doesn't mean you'll never miss. But what will happen is when you miss, you're going to know exactly why you missed, because you're going to run through it in your mind and go, oh man, I just did that. I just smashed the trigger arrow, whatever.
Well, it's interesting. You touched on this. You tell people, you say, okay, if you were to tell somebody what their effective range is or whatever that is, they're going to go into the field and to some extent just assume that applies in all situations, or whatever that may be, versus it's kind of that teach a man to fish scenario almost. Rather than giving them the fish, you're teaching them how to catch that fish and to calculate their own effective range in various situations, and to hopefully make that ethical decision when they're out on a hunt,
Yep.
In most situations, when I'm out elk hunting or when I'm chasing a high country mule deer or something, I can take that. I can take that 500-yard shot. The wind's not too bad, whatever. But again, I'm at 15,000 feet. The wind's howling. There's a little bit there's some snow falling, and I have this goat or sheep in my sights. Well, maybe that's not the most ethical shot to one of my visibilities. It's a great thing to teach how to make those decisions without making it for them.
Yeah. The good news is we give everybody the skill set to make their own judgments in every circumstance. So, again, as like I say, we don't tell them where their limits are. That's an ethical decision they have to decide themselves. But, by the time they leave here, they know one thing. It's a whole lot better to get on that airplane coming home, not having fired because you weren't comfortable, than it is coming home and you wounded the thing,
mm-hmm.
which is just tragic for everybody, obviously.
Well, I know myself, and it'll happen. You hunt long enough, it's going to happen. That's the one thing I feel like everyone agrees on. You're gonna wound an animal. Hopefully, you're able to track them, find them, and finish them off ethically, but it's going to happen. And I know those times as an ethical hunter, those times have just stuck with me and gnawed away at me. And I know that I did everything ethically, but it's still, so if I ever went and took a shot that I knew I probably shouldn't take and then wounded an animal, I would be miserable for months, for years after that. It would just never leave me, and it would mess with my future hunts, I can imagine.
Yeah, it would. It really rocks your confidence. Well said.
So, you talked about things like air density and angles and temperature, and I'm sure we could probably lay down a 3-hour long podcast solely discussing the technicalities of just one of those. I'd be interested if maybe if you could maybe give just a quick overview though on how those things generally can affect your shot, like in kind of the umbrella fashion. As you see changes in temperature, what does that tend to do to bullets? As when you're shooting at a steep angle uphill or a steep angle downhill, what is that kind of the general overview of those things?
Well, temperature, for instance, the higher the temperature, the thinner the air, generally speaking. The higher the altitude, the thinner the air. So we've actually had, this is a true story, we've actually had a lady leaving here going for a Marco Polo hunt in Tajikistan. And so she has a 4,000 DA card, as I said, what we run here, 80 degrees, 2,000 feet. She actually took that card to Tajikistan and it worked because she was at 15,000 feet and the temperature was like minus 30. So the temperature and the altitude offset each other in that, yeah, if you've got real cold air, so now the air is more dense, right? But you've gone up in altitude, the air is less dense, but those two can actually offset each other. Now, past 600-700 yards, yeah, any change at all starts making a big dramatic effect. But so generally speaking, before a person has to worry about if they have a card when they leave here, they're going to have to do something like go all the way down to sea level in a super cold day, like in Alaska on Kodiak would be a good example of that. Past 300 yards, you're going to start seeing some bullet change, or your ballistics change quite a bit, actually. And so you've got that extreme at, again, sea level, very cold day, say 0 degrees, to if you go to, say, high altitude and you've got a warm day, which a lot of people think, well, it's always cold at altitude, and you know better than that. It's not. Yeah. So if you get an 80-degree day at like 10,000 foot, all of a sudden you've got both factors going in the wrong direction. You've got thin air and thinner air because of the high temperature. So past, again, 300 yards, you're going to have your bullets are going to start shooting higher because the air is thinner. And and then there's other factors too, Sam, like a lot of people don't realize we, as a general rule here, if you zeroed your gun at say 80 degrees and you take it to like 0 degrees, which is pretty extreme change, right? That's 80-degree shift. You're generally speaking going to get about a 1 foot per second shift in your muzzle velocity. And 80 feet a second shift is huge at 300 and 400 and more yards, 300 and 400 yards and beyond. So there's also that factor. That's why we tell people when you're on an extreme cold mountain hunt, keep your bullets in your pocket because you want to keep them close to whatever temperature you zeroed your gun at. So you've got, or wherever, what temperature your range guard was built at. So there's just an endless number of factors that can really screw up a hunt for you.
So what about angles? How do different angles affect your shot?
Well, for instance, in our world, technically, if we were NASA, this statement would not be true, but thankfully we're not NASA. But in the hunting world, say out to 700 yards, 30 degrees up and 30 degrees down is pretty much the same effect on your bullet drift. So in other words, if you're shooting at 30, in our general rifleman's rule is 30 degrees and 300 yards, don't worry about it. If you're under 30 degrees and you're under 300 yards, don't worry about the angle effect. But at 30 degrees or even 20 degrees and you're out at 500 and 600 yards, all of a sudden your bullet drop's not going to be as much as it was, say, at a flat trajectory because your distance is literally shortened. So a lot of people have trouble wrapping their head around, well, why would an angle make a difference? Well, just trust me, it does. And we'll show you in the manual, our SAAM manual, that has the calculation for it. So, and your range card has the formula for it too. So it's just things to consider, especially on Dall sheep and, bighorn hunts and mountain goats. And it may not feel like much angle, but what we find is many people overestimate the angle. So on a 30-degree slope, you're going to be hanging on. I mean, that's really steep. Mm-hmm. So, we hear stories all the time. Well, I was shooting a goat and I was sitting there at about 60-degree angle. No, you weren't. You'd have fallen off the mountain. So, so some people tend to, as a general rule, and I'm the same, I overestimate, most people do, the angle, and they overestimate distance. So that's why a rangefinder is so darn important.
That's one thing I always thought was very interesting because, we talked early and I do a lot of bow hunting, and I feel like especially with bow hunting, you run into a lot more extreme angles because you're not shooting it as quite as far of a distance. So if you're shooting uphill at a deer, the likelihood of it being a more extreme angle is a little bit higher. And
right.
That was one thing that really surprised me learning was how that angle is going to affect your shot, and how you need to actually be measuring that angle and looking for those those angle compensating rangefinders is
right.
pretty critical when you're bow hunting. And
the same laws apply. I mean, they certainly do, especially you bow hunter, guys that bow hunt. My hat's off to bow hunters. You guys, number one, you got to be a really good hunter to get that close. But to sit in a tree, I
don't know about that. Let's just say I've killed stuff with my bow, so you don't have to be a really good hunter. Let's just throw that out there.
Well, generally speaking. So yeah, you guys are sitting 30 feet up in the air in a tree, and you're shooting a deer at the base of this tree. Now, talk about extreme angle. I mean, that's pretty close to 180. So you guys, to be able to make that shot, the rule. The same geometry applies to that bow hunting and shooting in that respect.
And it's one of those things that it's funny. I know in my head that it's accurate, but I look at that and I'm like, that just makes no sense to me. Yeah. It makes absolutely no sense to me. That I'm saying, or I'm at the bottom of a hill. I'm shooting 30 yards uphill at a mule deer or something, but I got to put effectively my 15, like if I had a 15-yard pin, but I got to shoot it as if it was at 15 yards.
Right.
And I'm like, it makes me feel so uncomfortable, even though I know it's right.
Yeah, it's very true. That's probably our biggest argument factor in the class. People get to that section of the manual and go, what? Come on, it can't be right. And then you walk them through the geometry of it, and it does make total sense. That's why your newer, more modern rangefinders have an actual yard line and then your shooting yard line, and it's got the compensator built into it. It starts to make sense when you look at it.
So talking a little bit more about the ranch, you guys also do a lot of hunts out there, correct?
We do. Yes, sir.
Tell me about, you have the hunts. We were talking a little bit earlier. You do a lot of work with zoos. I heard a story one time, and I can't even remember who told it to me. I don't have all the details, but wouldn't surprise me if it was true. It was something along the lines of, I think it was somewhere in India or something. There was a species of tiger that was about to go extinct, and there was such a healthy population of them in Texas that they were able to repopulate that native country's population of tigers from the populations they had from historically in Texas.
Right.
And
that's actually true. I'll give you another example. So I'm a member of the Exotic Wildlife Association, which is a big association here in Texas, because the breeding of non-indigenous animals in Texas is a huge business. It's billions of dollars. And thank God for Texas, because a lot of these species would be gone, like the scimitar horned oryx, the Dama gazelles, the Eld's deer, and that sort of thing. So we as an organization shipped 40 scimitar horned oryx back to Senegal, where they've been extinct for years, which is kind of a really pretty crappy place in northern Africa, a lot of desert. And so anyways, we built a big fenced in compound, and the Senegalese army was guarding them. And it's been an extremely successful program trying to reintroduce those species back into, the wild there in Senegal. Years ago, we did a bongo exchange with Kenya. When Kenya outlawed hunting in 1975, they have a species it's categorized as kind of the mountain bongo, which is typically a jungle animal. And we shipped 28 bongos back to Kenya to get them back into the wild in the mountains. They'd all been poached out. So, since 1975. So there's some really cool programs going on. Now, what we focus on here is animals that are no longer huntable or extinct where they're indigenous from, but they have to do really well in our rugged mountains. So like that bongo I'm telling you about, the scimitar horned oryx, we wouldn't have those because those are more plains or jungle animals. So we have things like Nubian ibex, Bucaran markhor, the Trans-Caspian urials, Iranian red sheep, things that you can't go hunt anymore. And then in that breeding program, we buy and trade in and out of what I call the zoo industry. It's actually part of that Exotic Wildlife Association's program, because zoos won't buy it directly from a ranch that hunts. nor would they sell directly to a ranch that hunts. So we have to go through a broker sort of thing, which is fine. But we sell way more animals every year back into the zoo industry than we hunt. So when the animals are born in our massive breeding program, the males are then, after they're weaned, obviously they get put into an aging system, a 5-year aging system, and then we release them into the wild here. We used to have the females in the wild with the males, but we have such a huge predator problem here in Texas between the mountain lions, bobcats, and coyotes. We got really tired of finding, $5,000 babies dead on the ground eaten by a bobcat. So we put them into this breeding program and then release the more mature males when they're ready to defend themselves.
It's interesting. Like, I don't know. It's this weird picture in my head. It's hard to picture a coyote chasing after something, like these exotic mountain animals. And I'm like, my brain's having a little bit of trouble wrapping around it.
Yeah.
Because we've all watched National Geographic and whatever it is, you expect exotic animals are going to have exotic predators, but no, when they're here in North America, they're going to have our North American predators too.
Yeah. So we have axis deer, which of course were from India, basically, mostly. There were some in Pakistan, are some, but India mostly. Of course, they've outlawed India hunting since the 70s. But there's no tigers chasing our axis deer. But it's really cool to see how these animals have evolved over the eons. Like axis deer, for instance, if you're killing a doe for meat, because it's some of the best eating meat in the world, it's almost impossible to shoot an axis doe that's not lactating or pregnant or both, because they have babies all year. They literally have 3 babies every 2 years. And in my opinion, that was Mother Nature's way to preserve the species, because they're raised around tigers and leopards and severe meat eating type critters. So they're really neat animals.
Yeah, I've heard that before, that they don't have it's not like necessarily like a mule deer or an elk or something where you'll see all of them going into velvet at the same time. They have the rut at the same time. Generally, like it's like you can anticipate. I've heard from people that hunt them in Texas or in Hawaii, wherever they happen to be, that one day you'll be chasing one that's in velvet, and then the next day you'll see some hard-horned ones and some that have lost their antlers, and it's just all over the place. They're spastic. Well,
in theory, the axis deer, loses its horn in its birth month. So if it's born in June, it's going to drop its horn in June for the rest of its life. Now, I'm sure that's plus or minus a few weeks either way, but typically that's what we see. So we do have hard horn and velvet horn axis deer all year round here on the ranch. It's pretty interesting.
That's such a strange thing to me, because you'd expect it to be triggered like the other animals somewhat by the weather and the sun and the moon cycles and all of that that crazy stuff. But I'll tell you what, when I first started hunting, like my passion has always been kind of the North American big game animals, and I got really into them. And but I've spent a lot more time with friends that are obsessed with exotics, and I'm sure you probably are aware of Cable Smith with the Lone Star Outdoor Show.
Yep,
he was the first one that introduced me, to an aoudad. I remember I was talking with him, and he's like, "Oh yeah, these things are really cool." And I look it up, and I was like, "Oh, that's amazing." And then he's showed me pictures of black bucks and this and that. And I've gone to visit him a few times, and we've had a lot of discussions about exotics. And I tell you what, it's starting to get to me. I'm starting to become a bit of a convert. The more DSC and SCI people I spend time with, the more I'm like, maybe I could save up for an African hunt. It might be interesting.
Well, I can tell you one thing. I've done 37 trips to Africa, and if you go, you're going to go full retard and you'll go back. I can promise you. It's the most addictive drug in the world.
I tell you, I was talking with Britt Longoria, and she was telling me some stories about Africa, and she's the one that kind of finally tipped the scales for me, just talking about some of the safaris and stuff out there. And I'm like, oh, and I'll tell you what, the shooting a Cape buffalo, that's like some man stuff right there. I mean, not saying that a woman couldn't do it, but like, that's like, as a dude, like shooting the world's deadliest animal.
Yeah.
I mean, come on. Like, that's as badass as it gets. Am I wrong? Like,
no, you're right. It's pretty. It's a pucker factor and a humbling factor. I mean, it truly is. It's I forget. Oh, it was Peter Capstick said it best. A buffalo looks actually like you owe him money, and they just they just have that look and the feel. And as you get closer and closer, and you're always trying to hunt the oldest bull, not just the biggest one, because you want to take the old one out of the herd always. It's humbling. It really is. I put it this way. I've killed a lot of buffalo, and I've never yet not shed a tear. I mean, it's just the most humbling thing in the world.
So one thing you mentioned, and I've talked about this a little bit on the podcast, but it's something that I think is super important to, I guess, reiterate or just remind people of, is especially with the exotics and the African animals, is the topic of trophy hunting.
Yep.
And you guys just go after it because you just want the biggest set of horns and this and that, the other. Well, I mean, yeah, that's cool. Don't get me wrong. Like, I'm not going to pretend like a big old head on the wall isn't pretty badass,
right?
But there is a scientific reason for going after the oldest, most mature animals in the herd. Right. Maybe you could elaborate a little bit on that.
Well, you're right. That trophy hunting, unfortunately, we hunters gave the anti-hunters that catchphrase, and they've made hay out of it. I mean, they've done really well with it. And it's a tough one for people that don't hunt to understand what that means. And I'm not ashamed that, if I've got a choice of 4 sable in this massive herd of sable antelope, and the oldest one happens to be the heaviest one, maybe not the longest, but he's the oldest one, but that's my trophy. And so I guess if we're not allowed to use the word trophy, then I guess high schools can't hand out racing trophies anymore, or, track and track meet trophies, or basketball or baseball or football trophies. So I guess we have to eliminate that word. The anti-hunters, they what they don't understand is that if you don't hunt these animals, there will be no animals. And you can preach that all day long, and I don't believe it. But you look at the cases like Kenya. I mean, there were 115,000 elephants in 1973 when they outlawed hunting elephants. Today, there's 12 to 15,000 elephants left, and they're being guarded by the Army. And so obviously hunting was not the problem. They've been poached out. And what, you tell an anti-hunter this, and most people don't believe it, but 92% of the African elephants exist in the countries in Africa that hunt elephants. They just look at you and go, that can't be true. No, look it up. It's actually very true. So, if I go hunt an animal and I call that my trophy, does that make me a bad guy? No, I always hunt the oldest bull. I'll give you a prime example. 2 years ago, when I'm in Zambia, there was a sable that had been hit by a lion, and his back hip was all boogered up. And of course, he's running around limping, and he's nothing but lion bait. I mean, it's just a matter of time for a leopard or a lion gets him. So he wasn't the biggest one in the herd, but that's the one I shot. It was the right thing to do. It's the most moral and ethical thing to do. So, yeah, I don't really know how to argue against the word trophy, but I don't apologize for it. It is my trophy, and I personally always shoot the big ones. And they'll always have a guy that, won't do anything but shoot the biggest, the widest, the whatever. But you know what? There's bad doctors, there's bad hunters, there's bad preachers. Give me a break. You can't judge the whole industry off one bad apple.
Well, and I think, again, one of the important things to reiterate, and you definitely touched on that, is there's reasoning behind going after some of those big ones, some of those specific animals, whether that is you're taking mercy on one and going after the one with the boogered up hip,
right?
Or a lot of these older animals, they're past breeding age. They've passed on their genes. They're still trying to breed a lot of these, and they're chasing away all the young bucks or bulls or whatever they may be, but they're not passing on their genetics anymore.
Right.
So by taking that larger animal, you're ensuring the longevity of the herd. You're adding to that gene pool that's become a bit stagnant at that point.
Yep.
And again, let's face it, animals do not die pleasantly in the wild.
Nope, they do not. And hey, Sam, that's a really good point. Let's go back to your buffalo for a minute. So when you're buffalo hunting, you're typically hunting what they call Duggaboys. Okay. These are the old males that have gotten kicked out of the herd by the younger bulls, and they've gotten their butt kicked. And so they go off in what they call Duggaboy herds. And you might find one lone bull every now and then, but usually they're with 2 or 3 or 4 or 10 other bulls that have all gotten kicked out of their herd. Well, that's the one you're going to hunt. And there's a good reason for that, to your point. The last thing you want is that older bull now to get back into the herd and maybe cause the death of that younger, more genetically superior animal. And so that's the reason they're always hunting the older ones. And, some of my proudest buffalo are some of the smallest I've ever shot, but they were so darn old. I thought their teeth were falling out. I mean, they were just old. I'm talking 13, 14 years old, which is really old for a buffalo. So, 95% of the hunters out there always want to kill the oldest one. The fact that we're supposed to be always killing just the biggest one, that's a bunch of crap. That's not true.
Yeah, it's one of those things that I think it'll coincide a lot of the time.
Sure.
The older ones tend to be bigger. Yep. I mean, until you start getting to a certain age where they're just kind of falling apart. But,
right.
And generally it happens to coincide. But I think people react so emotionally to it. They don't take the time to really dig into the reasoning behind it. And so they just immediately drop to the worst possible interpretation, which is, oh, you just want a bigger rack for your wall.
Yep.
Well, yeah, I do. But that's not the only reason. And that's not the most important reason. But
until they start hunting, they won't realize that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So as we're kind of winding down, this, because of my history and this whole podcast is generally geared towards people that are trying to get into the sport. Maybe don't have the same background, whether, it's in hunting or shooting. And maybe you run into someone and, they know you're a hunter or they know you do marksmanship training. And they say, I've always wanted to get into shooting and hunting and all of this. It's really cool, but I don't know. I don't have any background in it. I don't know anyone that does it. It's a lot to learn. I don't know if I can.
Right.
What would you say to that person? What encouragement would you give them?
Well, it's funny you bring that up. In my mind, at least the shift I've seen in the last 8 to 10 months, in my opinion, there's only 2 good things that have come out of this COVID thing. 5.5 million new gun owners, right? And the other thing is people are all of a sudden more aware, like, what if I had to feed my family? I don't know that I could do it. And so put yourself in the shoes of a new younger person, maybe even 30s, someone in their 30s or 40s that weren't raised around hunting and they don't know how to hunt. Where in the world do you start? I mean, you were brave enough to just jump right in, right? But a lot of people don't have that constitution. So what we did is we started the SAAM New for Hunter program. So it's 5 nights, 4 days. It's a deeply discounted price. It includes a doe, a female of one of the species, whitetail, axis deer, black buck, whatever, fallow. And then what we do is take them through 2.5 days of training on how to be a really good marksman, say out to 300-400 yards. Then they start hunting, and we're going to guide them. And then Larry's coming in to teach them, hey, this is what these animals eat. Here's how they live. Here's how to call them. Here's where to hunt them. We're bringing in a game warden to give them a 2-hour class about, hey, I know you might not be from Texas, but here's how you stay out of trouble generally around the world. Don't do this. Don't do that. Don't do this. And then we're bringing in a professional butcher who's actually going to, now the animal they've shot, they're going to skin it, debone it, process the meat, show them how to, wrap it and take care of it properly. And then for a day and a half, we're bringing in a professional wild game chef who's going to actually teach them how to cook this meat. And so when they get here, they may have never picked up a gun before in their life, never killed a single thing. After 4 days, they're going to know everything from soup to nuts about this whole process. And we're really excited about it. It's called the SAAM New for Hunter program.
That is absolutely incredible. That's actually something I've wanted someone to start for a while now. And because again, I have such a passion for people that want to get into it, but just don't even know where to start. I have such a passion for that person. As I always put it, anybody that didn't grow up walking through the woods with granddad's gun kind of a thing. And that is an awesome program. Is that available on the website?
Yep, it's available on our website. In fact, Sam, why don't you come join us for our February class? Just come on down.
I would absolutely love to do that. My birthday's in February, so we'll call it a birthday celebration.
It's a birthday present to yourself.
There we go.
And it's free.
Oh, I love it.
We'd love to have you come through that. It's going to be great fun.
And let's face it, by the time February comes around, I'm going to be so excited to take some time off from all the snow in Montana.
Yeah.
So that's about perfect timing right there.
Yeah. No, we'd love to have you. Yeah, they just check it out on our website. It's on there, and then or just call us. Email us, whichever.
So, if people wanted to find everything online, where can they go?
Well, they'd go to www.ftw Foxtrot Tango Whiskey SAAM SAAM. So it's ftwsaam.com. That's the website. And they can call us at 830-234-4366, or just email me or anybody here in the office at Tim Fallon, TIMFALLON at FTW SAAM, again, ftwsaam.com.
Fantastic. Well, I'm going to make sure to link to all of that on the show notes page. That will be at thewildinitiative.com/173. Tim, thank you so much for taking the time with me today to sit down and chat.
You're welcome, Sam. It was nice to spend time with you, and come see us in February. I'll send you an invite on the email.
Absolutely. All right, y'all, that'll do it for this episode of The Wild Initiative. Make sure to check out the show notes page at thewildinitiative.com. Get links to everything we talked about in today's episode. That'll do it for this week. Looking forward to next time. But until then, I hope this episode inspired you to get involved, get outdoors, and plan your initiative for the wild.
Thank you for listening to The Wild Initiative. Please take a moment to leave a rating and review on iTunes or Stitcher, and head on over to thewildinitiative.com to get show notes, check out the blog, gear discounts, other podcasts from the Wild Initiative family, and more.